Welcome back, everyone, to another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. I'm Chris Peach, and this is episode 70.
He ended up quitting his job when I was at 3.5 years in. But, there was a lot of wrap up we needed to do because we were having twins. We weren't sure how that was going to turn out because it's very, very high risk. You know what I mean? So we kind of hedged our bets in the security zone for as long as we could. And then we came to a point where we're like, well, we can stay in the land of secure, or we can just decide to leap and see what happens.
On the show today is Kim and Cressel Anderson. Now, I wanted Kim and Cressel to come on because they recently paid off their mortgage inside their 20s. They're completely debt-free. But if that isn't cool enough, what happened afterwards is even more amazing. You see, Kim and Cressel were both working in corporate America, working their 9-to-5 jobs, and it was the commutes. It was being away from the home. It was wanting to start a family. They wanted something more in life, and they decided to do something about it. What started off with Kim as a small blog has grown into something that's truly amazing. She has now authored her first book, and she earns enough money working through her blog where she was able to stay home full-time, and her husband, Cressel, was also able to stay home full-time. So without further ado, let me bring on my good friends, Kim and Cressel Anderson. Kim Anderson and her husband, Cressel, on the show today. Excited to have you guys on. Kim, we've known each other now for a couple of years. We met at FinCon in Charlotte, actually, I think 2-3 years ago, at my first conference ever with my business. And I think you were one of the first people I met when I got off the plane, if I remember correctly. So
yeah, we were geeking out over Pinterest stuff.
That's right. What's funny is, I'm a firefighter, and I tell people this, that when I got into the blogging world, and I think I went to my first conference, and I get off the plane and somebody said, "Hey, this is Kim from Thrifty Little Mom." And you had asked me, "How's your Pinterest doing?" And I was like, "Oh, you mean my wife's Pinterest? She's doing great with it." You're like, "No, how's your business doing with Pinterest?" Because I didn't understand that men were actually involved with that. And believe it or not, for those listening, Pinterest is the second largest search engine besides Google. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
It's a very important tool. But anyway, enough about Pinterest. I wanted to have you and Cressel come on the show because you guys have a really, really cool story. We've talked about this a little bit already, but I wanted the listeners to hear your story because it's pretty inspiring. You're causing me to even want to take even more action with my life. So before we get started, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and let us know how this all began? When did you and Cressel meet? And we'll start there.
Yeah, we met when we were 17. We met at church, actually. His dad was a pastor, and it was one of those things where we joke about having an arranged marriage because I wasn't going to go with my parents to the church that they were going to. I liked where I was, and they were like, no, you should come over here. There's a really good looking pastor's son. And I was like, I don't know about that. On the other side of that, he went away for the summer, and I went to finally visit, and he was gone. But then his mom and his grandmother saw me, and they met me and liked me, and they kept calling him where he was over the summer and saying, there's this really nice girl here. And his grandmother, before he even got back, I remember she looked at me one day, at a dinner we were having, and said, "I don't really care what anybody says. Those two are going to get married." And I had not even met him yet.
That is an arranged marriage. Cressel, is that how it really happened?
That's pretty close. It wasn't we're twisting your arm. We're financially invested in the success of this arranged marriage. We got to evaluate each other and do the normal kind of, dated for a while. And then it got a little bit more serious. I mean, I think we were both on the lookout for the one. So that was kind of the purpose going into it. But yeah, we clicked. I really am glad that I ended up with Kim. She's perfect in every way that I could want. So I'm inspired by her on a daily basis. And I'm really glad that things worked out the way they did. Family was very supportive. So I think that's an important aspect of finding somebody, is realizing that you're not just getting them, you're really getting the whole extended family as part of the package. So it's something to consider.
Cressel, now my wife's going to listen to this and say, "Man, why aren't you like Cressel? He's so sweet and so nice." So got to thank you for that one, buddy. We're going to leave it in there. I'm not going to edit that out. But yeah, you really just threw me under the bus there. No, I'm just kidding. So you guys obviously get married young. Then you went to college, correct? Both of you have degrees?
Yeah, we got married just out of college, and then we moved to Georgia because he got into Georgia Tech. And the beautiful thing about it was we both lived at home with our parents. We made the choice to live at home and go to a school that was local. So when we graduated, we didn't have any kind of student loan debt or anything. And then he had done so well in undergrad with grades and accolades and all that kind of stuff that Georgia Tech offered him a scholarship to their master's program.
So Cressel, when you were going to Georgia Tech then, what did you get your degree in as far as undergrad and master's?
Well, I went to UNC Charlotte undergrad, did electrical and computer engineering. And then for graduate school, I went to Georgia Tech. I also did electrical and computer engineering. Systems and controls was my concentration. So basically controlling things using electricity is maybe a good elevator way to describe that.
This is the way I would describe it. Cressel is very, very smart. How about that? So we'll go, you're a very, very bright, intelligent engineer. Kim, tell me what you went to school for.
I went to school for communication studies.
Perfect. That's what my wife did too. Same thing.
Yeah. With a concentration in like interdisciplinary health and health studies. I thought that I was going to end up working at a hospital, like in the administrative office or something like that.
And you went to Georgia Tech as well?
No, I went to UNCC and we got married just after I graduated. And then I got a job at a retail store, which sucked.
Okay. Honesty. So I'm kind of building the suspense here because people are listening going, okay, this sounds pretty normal. So let's kind of walk through then. You guys get married, you get a house. Take me through that period there leading in towards, your mortgage and what came next.
Well, the bigger issue was my husband was actually in the PhD program at Georgia Tech. And that's kind of where things started to change for us because he was realizing how much he really, really was not going in the direction his life wanted to go. And so I can still remember the night that he came home from Georgia Tech, like he had been sleeping in the lab every night, working so hard, dropped his backpack, just went to the room, totally dejected. And I was like, oh crap, this is not good. So I walked in and we had this really long talk and he was just like, this is not what I want. I don't want to have to move to California. I don't want to move to Boston. Like I don't want to do robotics long term because that was what we were headed towards originally. So at that point was when we made the decision to pivot. And so that's why he got his master's in electrical. And then we were like, okay, let's go get a regular job. So it was another one of those situations where it was like a terrible economy because it was in like 2008, 2009 when we made this pivot. And he still was able to get an engineering job. And we moved out of the city and into the suburbs. So that's kind of what you do, right? When you get like a real job. Everything was good. I was excited to have a new house. And then I was working still in the city. And so my commute was awful. In Atlanta, it's like the worst traffic ever. So every day my commute was 2 hours in the city and 2 hours out of the city. And that's really not how long the drive, like the drive should only taken me 30 minutes, but that's how bad traffic is. And I came to this conclusion, man, that I was wasting 4 hours of my life every single day sitting in a car with nothing to show for it at all. And it was taking a toll on like my ability to like take care of house stuff and like just manage life outside of work. If you're married and you're living in a house together, like all that stuff starts to kind of cause friction and stuff like that. And so it was another time in our lives where we had to stop and say, like, are we actually doing what it is we want to do? And is it time to pivot again? And in this instance, he kept bugging me about quitting my job. And I'm like, no, I can't do that because I have a 4-year degree. Like I worked my butt off to get where I am and like all these things that you consider. But at the core of it all, I wasn't happy. Like I wasn't enjoying life. I was feeling frustrated all the time. And I finally remember like one night he asked me one more time, he's like, why don't you just stay at home? And at that point, I was not involved in our family finances. Like he kind of knew what was going on all the time, but I had no idea. And I was like, I don't like math. I'm not going to get involved in this. I don't care. Like you just tell me when I need to stop spending money. Like that was kind of my attitude about stuff. I remember that afternoon just walking in and being like, okay, you keep telling me to quit. What are we going to do? Like if I quit, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, why don't we just go sit down and see how much money we have and see if it's possible? Like if we eliminate your income, what happens? And that was the first time that I, as a wife, got involved in the family finances, like to look and see what was actually going on. And when we did the numbers, we actually were going to be okay. I don't think it was going to be like crushing it or anything, but we were going to be okay.
That's such a relatable story, Kim, because I actually can relate to that too. And I'm sure people listening is you go through college, right? And you study something and it almost feels like the American way is, okay, I went to school and I got this degree. Now this is my life forever. And it's almost unfair in a way because we decide what we're going to do for the rest of our lives when we're 18 or 19 years old because that's the degree we got. Especially if you like specialize, like if you become a lawyer or a doctor or you spend a lot of money in school, you think that's the direction I have to go. And there's no other option. So I like what you said about, it's time to pivot, right? You have to sometimes pivot. And I do this as well, is I always look in the rearview mirror. I know I shouldn't, but I'm always thinking, well, I've already done all of this work. And if I start over now, I'll be starting over from scratch. And that is true. You will be, but I think that's necessary to pivot. So going back to your point, there has to become that pinnacle point for you. I mean, I was just doing the math here, 20 hours a week sitting in a car in traffic and not getting paid for it and being away from your husband. You do that for X amount of months or years. I think that would be your pinnacle point where you say, I'm done. We're going to change. We're going to pivot. It's very relatable, but that's the scariest thing is, can we make it? So what did that look like when you guys sat down and looked at an official budget? Was there things you had to cut back, things you had to change? Was there extra income going to have to come from somewhere else? What was that like?
Well, I definitely had to give up Starbucks every single day. And I had to give up going to Target because Target is like kryptonite for me. Like I would go in just to get face wash or something and come out with $300 worth of stuff. So I don't really ever feel like I had like a huge spending problem because I'm pretty thrifty anyway, but I still am addicted to like clearance prices and stuff. So if it's like a really good deal and you spend $300 to get all your good deals, like that's still $300.
It's funny you mentioned Target. So many people on the podcast have actually mentioned Target as like their kryptonite. So there's this book I encourage people to read. It's called The Power of Habit. We'll put links in the show notes to it. But The Power of Habit talks about the different habits we have. So Target actually created this qualitative analysis. That's a big word, right? Qualitative analysis on our habits. And so basically you go through the store and you have your phone on. And if you have the Target app open or your Bluetooth open, there are locations in the store that are watching where you walk and where you stop, where you pick stuff off the shelf. And it's watching all of this behavior. And then it's obviously watching what you buy at the register. What they've been able to do is predict when a woman is in her first trimester, second trimester, or third trimester based on the habits inside Target. So to take that a step further, now when they're marketing, if you're in your third trimester, you're going to get something in the mail that would be relevant to somebody in their third trimester. And it just blows my mind. This is all based on habits. So, when people say I go into Target to go get a bottle of shampoo and I walk out with, a cart full of things, it's designed that way. It's completely designed that way. And it's unbelievable. And I'm not picking on Target. I think it's brilliant. Just be forewarned by it. So take me into that piece of your mortgage.
Well, what really happened, the truth is, I had been staying at home for a little while. And since I had been a little bit more engaged in the financial situation, I was watching the various things we were spending money on. So like I would check up on the credit card bills and things like that and kind of see what was going on. And we weren't the kind of people that really spent over. We could pay off our credit card every month. So we weren't carrying like a balance and all that kind of stuff. But I just watched it to make sure that we were always, in the good, because it was like, we'll use our credit cards as we get cash back or we get points or we get, whatever. So that was why we used them. And then I was sitting there going over it one day and I'm like, I've never ordered anything from this place before. Like, what is this? And then I called him at work and I'm like, did you order this? And he's like, no, I've never ordered anything from there before. And I was like, this is not good. So I had to be on the phone for like an hour and a half trying to figure out where it came from. And they had to go do some investigation to figure it out. And come to find out, after I spent probably 3 hours on the phone with the credit card company, that someone had gotten our card and had sent a keyboard to a spa in California somewhere. I was so upset because that wasn't even the last time that it happened. Well, that wasn't the first time that it happened. So it had happened before that. And this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I remember being on the phone with a customer service worker. And I said to him, I know that you're just a customer service worker because I know those people, they're just doing their job. But I said, if this call is being recorded for quality assurance, I need to let you know something. I'm like, I am not going to do this anymore. This is ridiculous. I am having to fight for this money tooth and nail for something I didn't even spend money on. I'm wasting my life on the phone trying to fight for this stuff. I'm done. I'm going cash only. And that was the end of the conversation for me. And when he got home from work that day, I was like fired up. Like I had gone to the library, gotten every book I could find on debt payoff and getting rid of credit cards and like anything I could find. I had read and read and read all afternoon. And when he got home, man, I was like ready. But in our situation, like I am the spender and he is the saver. So it really didn't take much for me to convince him. When we started looking at our finances, we didn't carry balances on our credit cards. We drive old used cars because that was like what our parents instilled in us. And we didn't have any school debt. So the only debt that we were looking at in our life was our mortgage. And at that point, because we had bought like a short sale house, after buying that house, we had like $93,000 left on the mortgage to pay off. I looked at him and I'm like, well, this is the only debt we really have. Like, is this something that we want to actually tackle. Because a lot of people say like, well, it's stupid to tackle mortgage debt because of this reason or that reason or whatever. And we just decided, what would our life be like if we owned our house free and clear, where nobody could come in and take it from us? I mean, we knew that we were going to live in the house for at least 3 years. And we really just talked about that a lot. And I think we decided, you know what, it's worth it. Like, it's worth it to just crush this. And that's what we did.
So you owe just over $90,000 on your mortgage, and you and Cressel together decide we are going to pay this thing off, correct?
Yep.
How long did that take?
So I did look at the amortization table. We kind of used an amortization table to track. And if you don't know what that is, you can basically look at your mortgage amount, what the principal is that you have on the mortgage, how much you owe, and you can look at how it's going to look as you're paying it off. And it's based on the payoff period, and it's based on the interest rate that you're paying. And so pretty much what we had done, I think when we bought our house, we had taken out like a $98,000 mortgage, something like that. We bought a house that was in the lower end of houses in the area. It wasn't the lowest. You could go out and find crummier places, but it was a good balance for us. I think the house was about $120,000, which was well below the median house price, even after the 2008 housing decline. We could handle that mortgage, I think, probably with about a quarter of the income that I was bringing in with my engineering job. And when we got that mortgage, it was $96,000, $98,000. I think we'd been paying a little bit before Kim really hit this breakthrough moment for us where she decided, hey, let's change the course of our financial future. I think we had probably paid it down to like $93,000 or $94,000, something in that range. Then we started using the amortization table and looking at, here's how it's going to pay off over the 30-year horizon for the loan, and decided, hey, let's pay it down quicker. And so I just downloaded a table off the internet and started tracking it as we went. Initially, we were putting maybe $500 a month extra onto the mortgage, which was essentially like twice what the mortgage payment was. And so we were applying that to principal, kind of reducing the balance that we owed on the mortgage. And we would throw in additional different things here and there, bonuses. Like if I got a bonus at work, that would go on there. The tax return would go on to this. And here and there, we had different things that we would try to do, gift money, that type of thing. Just anything we can really get our hands on, we would throw into there. And it was cool to be able to track it on that amortization table because it had a little graph and you could just kind of see that amount coming down. And you could play around with it like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, I'm just going to pay the minimum. And you could kind of see that it would, you were shaving years off of the mortgage payback horizon based on the fact that, last month you'd stuck $500 on there or something. You got kind of very real-time feedback about how you were changing the overall cost of that money that you had borrowed.
Cressel, I'm glad that you brought up the amortization schedule. My wife hates when I talk about the math part, right? Because I'm a nerdy math numbers guy. I think you and I probably get along real well because I have like this engineer type mind where I'm thinking numbers. But basically, for those listening, an amortization schedule, it works a little bit differently than a normal payoff schedule. So if you go out there and let's say you get a 30-year mortgage, it's going to be on an amortization type payment schedule, which means, let's say your interest rate, we'll just throw an easy number out there, is 5%. So you have an annual interest rate of 5%. Now, when you do your payments on year one, it's going to be like 90% interest and 10% principal. And then year two, it's going to move a little bit more principal, less interest. In the last year, year 30, the last payment you make is going to pretty much be 100% principal and no interest. So the banks do this on purpose, right? They're going to get the interest up front in the loan. It's not flat across. So I didn't realize this when I first started learning about this money. This was never taught to me. It wasn't taught to me in school. And most likely, unless you've actually done digging yourself, this is never taught to anybody. So you start looking at it and you realize, okay, this makes sense. Now, if I go from a 30 to a 15 year, your payment doesn't really double. And I think a lot of people think it will double because the math makes sense. If I go from 30 to 15, my payment will double. The reason why it doesn't is because it's on the amortization schedule. So what Cressel is saying here is they're making extra payments to the principal. So let's just say, Cressel, were you on a 30-year?
Yes. I guess there's a lot of advocates for 15-year, but we opted for 30 just to make the payment lower. But
do you remember what your payment was with principal and interest on that 30-year?
The payment with principal and interest was around $550, maybe $538 a month. We had opted for the traditional mortgage with higher down payment so that we could avoid the PMI, and overall, the smaller loan you get, the less money you're paying in fees and origination costs and miscellaneous commissions and all kind of stuff like that. So
if you're starting out your new mortgage, and let's just say it's $550, I think it'd be fair to say that payment number one would be about $500 and, maybe $30 in interest. And the first payment, maybe $15, $16 going to principal. As you get through your loan, you're going to start hitting more principal. But what you and Kim are doing, let's say you take an extra $500 and you put it 100% towards principal, not making another payment, but making sure it's a principal only payment. So now next month, your interest that you're paying is going to be based on the new balance. And that's why this is such a powerful tool when you understand how this amortization schedule works. So in a nutshell, if you're wondering how it works, we'll put links in the show notes. We have some stuff on our website to explain that, but you should just Google amortization schedule and look what happens when you just add a little bit towards principal every single month. It's tremendous. The amount of savings aren't hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands of dollars. It's tens to thousands to even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the amount of your loan and the length. So this is huge. And we haven't really talked about this a lot on the podcast, which I'm glad that Kim and Cressel are coming on talking about this. Now, kind of going back, how long did it take, Cressel, to go from the point where Kim says, all right, let's see if we can get rid of this mortgage, to the time it was completed?
About 20 months. I think it was slightly less than 2 years. I think that critical discussion happened in December, and we paid it off 20 months later.
How old were you, and how old was Kim when you guys paid it off?
We were 28 or 29, somewhere in that range.
So how many people out there do you know that are 28, 29 years old with a paid off mortgage and zero debt?
I don't really know that many.
I don't either, which is tremendously cool. I mean, that is unbelievable that in your 20s, you guys completely paid off everything. I mean, that's not normal. And I've talked about this before, is normal's not cool, right? Normal is normal, and we don't want to be normal. And you got people in their 20s now that have made the conscious decision to say, look, we're done going to pay interest to the bank. We're going to pay off our mortgage. Our house is going to be ours. No matter what happens, we still have a roof over our heads that they can't take away from us. And you do that in your 20s. I mean, this is just like, this is out of control. For me, back in 2010, this was not even comprehensible for me. Like, I really thought you would just have a mortgage to the grave. This was how it worked. Hey guys, Chris Peach here. Hey, did you know Andrew and I were once living paycheck to paycheck, and we had racked up $52,000 in consumer debt in only 4 years of marriage? Yeah, we were normal until we hit rock bottom. You see, since that moment, we decided to stop borrowing money, stop using credit cards, pay with cash, and then we did the unthinkable and we paid off $52,000 in only 7 months. Sounds crazy, right? Well, maybe not as crazy as working nonstop to send all of our money to the bank in the form of payments. Here's the deal. I'm hosting a free workshop where I share our story and I show you the same step-by-step method to going from broke to debt-free and then on to building wealth. So head on over to moneypeach.com/workshop to grab your spot in this free online training that I promise you are going to absolutely love. Once again, that's moneypeach.com/workshop. Obviously, you can tell I get really excited about this whole debt payoff thing, especially when you take it as far as paying off a mortgage. What did that feel like, paying off that last payment? Did you guys go to the bank to do it? Did you do it online? You have to know that moment.
So for me, like, that is really one of the most common questions I get. Everybody's like, how did you feel? I bet it felt amazing. I tell people I didn't feel any different. Like, I walked back in the house. I think I thought that I should have felt different, but I was just sort of like, okay, well, here we are back in our house. But the game-changing moment for us was when we sat down for the next month to do budget. Because up until this point, man, we had been putting every ounce of anything extra we had. It was just gone every month, right? Like, we were living minimally. Like, I was doing all these side hustles, trying to get money to put on the principal, all this stuff. Finally thinking, okay, I don't have to really do side hustles anymore. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. And looking, and he went into the spreadsheet, hit the delete button on the mortgage line. And there was this huge chunk of money just kind of sitting in the bottom of the spreadsheet to be allocated. That was sort of the moment where it hit us and we're like, what do we want to do now? Like, what are we going to do now? And that was really the moment I think we started dreaming pretty big with what we wanted to do with our lives, and starting to really think about, what do I want out of this one life I have to live? And what can I do to put my money behind those things?
Not go back to Target, right?
No, But I did have some flexibility. I mean, I like Target and I like Starbucks. So I recently wrote a book, and in the book I talk about must-have happy habits, because I really believe that if you're going to see something through to the end, you have to have a little bit of grace for yourself. Like, you can't just go hard, go hard, go hard all the time. You have to have, periods where you do things to celebrate your progress. And for me, like, once a week, maybe going and getting a $5 coffee is not a big deal, because it's what helped me get through to the finish line of what I was trying to tackle. But yeah, I definitely decided my money can do a lot more than what I think it can do. And if I'll put it towards the right things, I can do a lot more of the things I want in life. Because the truth is, what are you going to do with another throw pillow? What are you going to do with another set of curtains? Like, is it really going to move your life forward? You know what I mean? Like a new Coach bag, a fancy new car. Like, how much do those things actually move your life forward? There's nothing wrong with wanting those things or having those things or funding those things, but really asking yourself, what are the trades that I'm making in life for these things that don't really move the bar forward? Maybe you really want to go and travel. Like, have you ever wanted to just go see the world, or like go to Europe or go to New Zealand, like do something geeky, take a Lord of the Rings tour or something? Well, every time you go to Target and you sink $300, you're taking away from that opportunity. You're pulling away from that dream. I just want to encourage people to think about every time you spend money, like, what are you trading that particular instance for the future that you really want?
Kim, I completely agree with that. Andrea and I, back in 2011, we worked our butts off to get out of debt. I mean, to the point where I was cleaning pools in the summer, working overtime for the fire department. We sold everything, including our cars, some of our furniture. I mean, we literally called it scorched earth we went to. And I remember going through that process thinking, like, there's going to be an ending to this. There's going to be a reward. I just got to get to that point. It was like there had to be a finish line. Our finish line for us is we love traveling. And I remember recently, a couple months ago, we went to St. Thomas, which is, it's an expensive vacation to go from Phoenix to St. Thomas for 7 or 10 days or however long we went. And I remember somebody said, whoa, you're money peach. You shouldn't be going to the Caribbean. That costs money. And I was like, dude, we have money because we don't pay debt, right? We don't pay the bank interest. So we go on vacation. And I think that's okay. I think maybe not for you, but for us, we were in this grinding mode for so long that when we crossed that finish line, we almost didn't know how to react at first. Kind of like you said, like, okay, what's next? We had to like fully understand that we worked really hard to get to where we are, and it's okay to go on vacation, and it's okay to overpay for a Starbucks, and it's okay to go to Target and just buy a bunch of crap because you have that freedom now. You've earned that freedom. And so I always tell people, like, have a goal in mind. And if your goal is, I want to go fill a shopping cart up at Target once a week, do it without debt. That's your goal. It's your money. You get to choose that. But don't do that while you're struggling to pay off debt. Sacrifice now so you can do what you want later. That's why I love your story. I love what you're talking about in your book is like, it is okay to go enjoy life. The next thing, Kim, I want to transition to is you have a blog.
Yeah. It's called Thrifty Little Mom. I've been blogging for about 4.5 years. I think I pretty much discovered blogging not long after we paid off our mortgage. It was probably the summer after.
Tell me about starting this blog, because I have my own blog starting story. There's not many people that go from literally the fire truck, get home in the morning and start blogging, right? People are like, blogger, he's blogging. They didn't know what it was. And a lot of my friends still don't know what blogging is. But tell me about like getting started with your blog. What did that look like?
Well, I know because I was staying at home so much and now I had a kid and, kids kind of complicate things. It's not as easy to like just go and do when you want to go and do. And so I had always been this sort of entrepreneur at heart. That's why I was really excited when I had the opportunity to stay at home before I even had kids, because I really was able to explore a lot of entrepreneurial outlets in my life and like try to find something that stuck, but nothing was really sticking well. And I knew that I loved writing because at the time I was writing like curriculum and things like that as sort of my like little side hustle or the thing that I did. But I just remember one night, like I was in the shower and I was like ugly crying. And I was like, man, I have got to figure out what I'm going to do. What am I going to be in 18 years when this kid grows up and moves out, right? Because I know so many women, which is not a bad thing, but I just know so many women who have a child and it's like their child is their whole entire world. And then their child leaves and they have no idea like who they are or what they're doing with their lives because they've dedicated decades to raising these children. And I think that's like an awesome thing. But for me personally, I knew that I loved being a mother, but I also needed something else. And so I remember just kind of laying down, going to bed, and this like really random thought popped in my head of start a blog. And so when I woke up the next morning, I got on Amazon because that was back when like blogging wasn't necessarily fairly new, but it was kind of the season when people were starting to actually write about their blogging success. So where it wasn't just like online journals anymore, like people were actually making money online. So these books that I read were super inspiring. And I remember in Ruth Soukup's book, How to Blog for Profit Without Selling Your Soul, I got to chapter 2. And I remember reading one sentence where she said that she had made enough money blogging that her aeronautic engineer husband was able to quit his job. And, for me, like that was a light bulb moment because I'm like, if her husband, who's an engineer, can quit his job because of the amount of money that she makes blogging, I wonder if I could do the same thing. And so that was my quest. That was my goal. Like I had a new focus all of a sudden. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this blog to make enough money to where Cressel can quit his engineering job if he wants to.
I love this because it's very relatable for me. Long story short, I'm sitting at the fire station thinking about, like somebody had said, you should take your financial coaching stuff that you do and turn it into a blog. And I'm like literally researching in Google, define : blog, and trying to figure out like, what is a blog? And I'm like, I think I could do this. So I remember telling my wife, like, yeah, I'm going to start a blog and I'm just going to start talking about what I know about money. And she's like, but you're not a financial planner. I'm like, I don't think I need to be. She goes, okay. So I just literally started this blog and I met a few people. I met Deacon Hayes from Well Kept Wallet. He's here in Phoenix. He's another blogger. And they were generating full-time incomes. And I'll just say it. They're generating 6-figure businesses from their blog. And I'm thinking like, what? No, this is like hobby blogging. Like, no, this is a business. So I know you and I have talked about this already, but kind of like, what was that like when you go tell your engineer husband who has a master's degree that you were going to start generating income from blogging?
Well, I'm pretty sure he thought it was just another one of my things, right? Because as an entrepreneur, like you start businesses constantly, like you're always in the spaghetti against the wall phase. And I'm pretty sure he was just like, okay, go do it. And that's the kind of stuff that he would say. He would be like, okay, go blog, I guess, or whatever. And I remember sitting there one night and I got like 2 cents in AdSense income. And I was like, I made an income blogging. Like I was freaking out. And he was like, oh, that's so good. That's so cute. That whole thing. And I remember looking at him and being like, look, I'm going to make enough money that you can quit your engineering job. So you're laughing now, but you just wait.
Cressel, I'll just say it. I'm going to spoil the surprise. She now makes enough money where you were able to quit your engineering job, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so what was that like going from, enjoy your hobby to like, oh my gosh, my wife either makes as much as I do or even more than I do? I mean, can you walk me through those steps?
Yeah, sure. So, when it was pennies that you see on the AdSense dashboard, that was like, I don't think I said it was cute. I think I was a little bit more tactful. But basically, there was a point where it became dollars a day and then tens of dollars a day. And I was like, okay, well, this is probably better than sitting around and binging on Netflix or something. So it was kind of like, yeah, okay, that works. But I distinctly remember going to work with he was my supervisor at some point. I remember saying to him, Kim is really doing well with her blog. And it was one of those conversations like you were saying where people don't quite understand what it is they do or how you make money. And I remember saying I could see there being a day where I wasn't doing engineering, where she was really the primary breadwinner. And lo and behold, it did come to pass. I think when it really sunk in for me and where I had to say, I need to think strongly about whether coming into an engineering office makes sense, was the first month that she had more income than I did. And that was a really good thing, but it was also kind of a really, I guess, thought-provoking time where I had to kind of think about my career choices. And she had a different degree. She was really doing well with the blog. And I had to kind of eat a little bit of crow maybe because my perspective as an engineer is, hey, this is a technical degree. I'd been earning, a pretty good salary for 6 or 8 years, something like that. And Kim has her communications degree. She's, a super wife, but her career hadn't really manifested itself in the same way, with that financial feedback. And then she made it out of nothing. And so it was just kind of an interesting experience to kind of get to go through, and very relieving as well. Like when you have a family and you've got really one source of income, even if it's a big income, there's always the thought that, hey, something could change, orders could stop coming in, or, there could be a pullback in the sector of the economy. How would that look if I got laid off, or if, just that kind of thing that you go through when there's a single source of income. But I guess the nice thing with having Kim's blog was it really afforded the flexibility to be able to explore that space of what would it look like if we changed things up and did something besides a full-time engineering job in the office.
Kim, how long were you blogging with Thrifty Little Mom before it was time for Cressel to come home?
Well, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people think that I've been doing blogging full time for 4.5 years. But in reality, like when I started blogging, I really only worked part time. I had my curriculum writing that I was doing, and I ended up kind of putting that to the side because I wanted to blog more than I did that. And so I still stayed at home with my son at that point. And so there were these different seasons of blogging that I went through where I was really never working full time. It was really only when I could work on blogging. I know like even last January, I found out I was pregnant with twins, and that was like game changer. Like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? Like that whole thing. So there's just been so many seasons. And then I got my book contract 2 weeks after my twins were born. That was sort of like, I got to pull over here and I got to write this book and I got to do all this stuff, which took away from the blogging business. So I think we knew probably the beginning of year 3 that it was a possibility, but I don't know that we had really even thought about it that hard at that point. Like, I think we knew that, oh, this is like legit now, like, or whatever. And I was having months where I was bringing in more than he was. And he was just like, this is real, And so he ended up quitting his job, I think when I was at 3.5 years in. But, there was a lot of like wrap up we needed to do because we were having twins. We weren't sure how that was going to turn out because it's very, very high risk with the identical twins that we had. You know what I mean? So we kind of hedged our bets in the security zone for as long as we could. And then we came to a point where we're like, well, we can stay in the land of secure, or we can just decide to leap and see what happens. And typically speaking, really the biggest thing that stands in your way from most things is fear. Like fear is the one thing that keeps you from doing big things in life. And once we push past the fear of like the income changing and relying on one income again, but the opposite direction, the fear of having a family and having to do the whole like insurance thing, the fear of what everybody would think about us, just so many fears that would keep us. But if we had not done what we had done, we would not be in this really content and happy place that we're in right now. And I'm so glad that we did it.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are both home. Cressel, I've heard you say before that you got to take your kids to school or pick them up from the bus stop. And, those are things that you don't do when you work a 9-to-5 job or when you're traveling 2 hours each way to work. Those are things you would not be able to do. And so the cool thing is, the reason why I wanted to ask how long it took is I've been helping some other people start their blogs. Like, I started my own blog. So people are like, hey, how do you do this? So I've helped a few people. And the first year they're like, man, Chris, I haven't really made a ton of money. And I'm like, then you're doing it right because I haven't met a ton of people that go out there and crush it their first year. Usually it takes, sometimes 2, 3, even 4 years before you start seeing that upswing, that hockey stick movement in your business to the point where either, you quit your job or your husband or wife stays home or whatever your goal is and you hit that number. So if you're going to start something, I would say start. Don't expect to generate a ton of money right now. That's not, at least in the blogging world, but the money you can generate is very, very substantial. And the key factor there, I think, is effort plus time. Like it takes time. I've never met anybody who has a 6 or 7 figure blog that was like, yeah, I started, 6 weeks ago and it's just been absolutely amazing. It's like, no, I started in 2008 or I started in 2011 or 12 or whatever it might be. And so we have a repeat right here, like you said. And again, you were going through a pregnancy with twins. And so the next thing I want to talk about before we end here is let's talk about your book. So now you are an author, correct?
Yes.
The book is called?
It's called Live, Save, Spend, Repeat. And the subtitle is The Life You Want with the Money You Have.
If I'm going to pick up this book, which I am, what should I be in store for?
The book is really highly motivating to help people just take a step back to kind of wake up from just the never ending cycle of like everyday living, of getting up, making breakfast, going to work, going to school, dropping your kids off, carpool, all that stuff. Just kind of waking up and saying, am I moving my life in the direction that I want to go? Like, am I being strategic about what I'm doing every day? So there's elements of the book that kind of have a very, very grace-centered approach to budgeting. That is the one thing that I constantly hear is like, this is the first book I've read that doesn't beat me over the head about the budget stuff. It has a very grace-centered approach to that. And the core of the book is helping people to make goals, to set 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10-year goals and say, what do I want to accomplish in the next 10 years? And how do I put my money behind those things? How do I get momentum? And I think that there's a lot of people that could do a lot more with their lives and in their lives than they think but they just never take the time to stop in like the hustle and the bustle of everyday living to say, what do I want and how do I get there, and make a plan and then pursue it, just like you did with your wife and just like we did, just deciding that I'm going to pursue this with everything I've got until I get there.
Kim and Cressel as well. Let's say that someone's listening to this right now. They're driving in their car and they're stuck in traffic and they're over it. Or they got in an argument with their boss today and they don't want to be there anymore. But they feel like they're just stuck. This is the way it's always going to be, right? Because I think so many people feel that this is how life worked out for me. What's one piece of advice, starting off with you, Kim, what's one piece of advice that you would give that person listening right now?
I would just say it's never, ever, ever too late to pivot in life. We live in this like amazing world where there's so many different opportunities, either online or in the world around you, to find work that you might actually enjoy. And so I would dare people to take a step back and really ask themselves, am I doing this because this is what I'm supposed to do? This is what people expect me to do because this is what my degree is in, even though I hate it every single day? And ask yourself if it's time for you to pivot. And if you did pivot, what would you do? And I'm not a person who encourages people to like leap before you have the funds. I'm not this like super dream chaser where I feel like there's wisdom in saying, how do I make the transition out of where I am to where I want to be based on what I have to work with? And, you know, for us, even like my husband, he started a YouTube channel a year before he quit his job. And so he makes an income from his YouTube channel and blog. But I knew that needed to be developed for him to have something to leap to. And that is what he wanted to do. Like, he didn't want to just necessarily leap solely into being a stay-at-home dad. Like, he wanted to have his own thing too. And now he's excited because he gets to, as part of his day job, which is his YouTube channel, is he gets to make stuff. Like, he gets to work in the garage and build and be creative and dig into that space that he's always wanted to explore in his life. Like, to see, you know, what can my creativity, what can my ingenuity, what can that create in the space that I have to work with?
You got to do what you love because you made the decision early on to pivot and work in that direction. Cressel, what would your piece of advice be to somebody who's kind of in those similar shoes thinking there has to be more in life? What's one thing you would tell them?
I guess the biggest thing that primarily applies to somebody that's married or kind of in a long-term relationship is to invest in your spouse. Like, I think Kim really amazed me with how she grew professionally. And I think it's important for couples to do money stuff together, like to sit down regularly and discuss the strategy for how we're going to use our collective resources to build the future that we want, kind of long-term plan together, and investing in your spouse, getting them in the loop with where the money's at, what the long-term plan is not just a nice thing to do. I think it's really important for healthy relationships. I think it's critical, especially as you get older, that both team members are up to speed with where the money is at, what the money situation looks like, particularly when you get older, because if something were to happen to the other person, I mean, you would want to make sure that you both pretty much know where everything's at. So I feel like I was able to invest in Kim and kind of help us develop a better picture of where our finances were and where they were going. But then she's done the same thing with me. She invested in me. She invested in my happiness, in being able to come home and focus on the family, not have a long commute, be able to explore projects that I'm passionate about. And so that investment in each other, I think, is probably the biggest thing that I would recommend for people who kind of are looking to change their situation, is to work with your family regardless of whatever that structure is that you've got in your life.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, guys, where can we find more about you?
I've got my blog, Thrifty Little Mom, that you can check out. And then the book is on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's on Walmart.com, Target.com, and it's also in Audible. So if you're a person who likes to listen versus read.
So we'll put links in the show notes to all of that. Thrifty Little Mom, anywhere you can get your book. And then, Cressel, where can we find your YouTube channel? What should we search?
You can search for Makercise. That's Makercise, kind of like exercise. The point of Makercise is to exercise your inner maker. So you can search on YouTube, or you check it out, makercise.com.
Hey guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's cool to see a husband and wife come on together. I think we've only had this happen one time before, and they were both physical therapists. They worked together. They own the same practice. And now get to have you guys come on the show. And it's just really cool to see a couple that came together and, made it happen on their terms. I mean, paying off your mortgage in your 20s and then creating your side hustles that turn into your full-time jobs where you get to stay home. And, you basically have built your dream. And obviously in this short episode here, we're able to go through the entire thing. And I totally understand the amount of work and effort that goes into it. So from a fellow blogger to you guys, just want to say congratulations. You guys are awesome and super glad you guys took the time to come on the show. Really appreciate you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, anything that Kim and Cressel and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session70. That's moneypeach.com/session70. Special thanks goes out to my producer, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, this show would not be possible. We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place, with another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. Take care.
Boom, 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 boom.